Well, hello, folks. Welcome to our webinar, Community Choice Energy, What is the Economic Impact of Local Renewable Power Purchasing in the San Joaquin Valley case study. And my name is Woody Hastings. I'm the Renewable Energy Manager for the Center for Climate Protection. I'll be your host. We're going to get started a little bit afternoon, so we're in a sort of just a holding pattern here right now. Thank you for being on. You are the early birds. Thank you for being on a couple of minutes early. So I will hold off on going into any further detail about the housekeeping or our presenters and stuff until we've got more of our attendees. We currently have about 21 out of our 101 attendees on the webinar today. And again, we're happy to have you all here, and I will begin the presentation probably maybe like 2 or 3 minutes after noon, give people a chance to get on board. And my organizers and presenters, can you guys still hear me?
Yes, just fine, thank you.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Just making sure. And is the screen coming up full screen right now? Welcome, Community Choice.
We're seeing your path. There we go. Yeah, you're full screen.
Okay. Yeah, it's a problem here every time, and I know you all can hear me. All let's see, however many of you there are, 29 now. When I go to the control panel, it switches it off of full screen, so that's you know, a bit of a problem every time I try to do anything in the control panel. So Ross, I don't know if you in the background can figure that one out, but
yeah, I'm taking a look.
So thank you again, the attendees. Just maybe a little audio check. If any of you are having trouble hearing me, of course, if you're having trouble hearing me, you wouldn't be able to chime in on the question tab. But you know, hopefully folks are okay. I see. If folks can hear me, and if you're having any problem with the audio, please let us know on the question tab. And Ross and Ismael and Ben, just one more time, you know, you guys are on, you know, can be heard. So hopefully keep background noise in each of your places to a minimum.
Will do.
You got it.
Okay, people are continuing to join. We're up to 36 of our 101 souls, so we will get started shortly. Appreciate folks that are logging on time. That's very good, and we're happy to have you here. Again, this is the webinar covering the report, the recently published report, Community Choice Energy and the Economic Impacts of Local Renewable Power Purchasing, and it's a case study of the San Joaquin Valley. We'll get started in about a minute.
And Woody, I did look at that full screen issue, and that's something GoToWebinar knows about, and they do not have a fix for it at this time, so we'll have to hope for a fix before the next webinar.
So I think what that says is that presenters, when I switch it over to you, it is going to ramp it down to the non-full screen, so you'll need to ramp it back up to the full screen when you get control. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so it's a few minutes after noon. We have about half of our people on board, so I'm going to get started. Thank you again all for joining the webinar, What is the Economic Impact of Local Renewable Power Purchasing in the San Joaquin Valley? It's a case study and produced by the Center for Climate Protection and our program, the Clean Power Exchange. And first, a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, so if you are having difficulty, hearing or seeing or whatever, it is being recorded, and we will share it with anyone who requests the recording, and it will be automatically shared with everyone who is on board today. There is a place for you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen where you can enter questions. You can enter questions at any time, but we are going to hold off on actually doing the Q&A until the latter half of the webinar. Hopefully we'll keep it time tight so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And again, if you're having trouble, we will send you the recording, and that should be something that hopefully will have good sound and good visual quality. So, our presenters today are Ben Foster of Fostera Clean Energy Consulting. Ben is the study author, and so he will present the study, probably 15 or 20 minutes to present the study. And Ismael Herrera, Associate Director of the Fresno State Office of Community and Economic Development, will round out the discussion with discussion of the sort of bigger picture, the context in the San Joaquin Valley, and some of the solar deployments that have been occurring in the Central Valley, and the meaning of that in the Central Valley, then we'll get into the Q&A. I should mention we have our co-organizer Ross Markey, staff here at the Center for Climate Protection, who will help answer questions, and so I think that's that. Just a little bit about the Center for Climate Protection and its Clean Power Exchange program. We've been working
Hello, Woody. This is Ben Foster and everyone. I'm not sure that I can hear Woody's audio right now.
I'm not able to hear him either.
Yeah, Woody, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Now I heard you.
Now we can. There we go.
Now you can?
Yes.
Yes.
Where did I cut off? Okay, do people hear now? About a minute ago. All right. Well, I guess what we'll do is, do you recall where I was when it cut out?
You just finished introductions, and we're heading on to the
Ismael,
next
Ben?
slide.
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you fine.
So it sounds like my audio is back. I don't know what happened. Ben and Ismael, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ben? Okay, good. So I'll assume that the audience can hear as well. I was just talking a little bit about the Center for Climate Protection and the Clean Power Exchange program that it runs, our work in the Central Valley in 2016. The Clean Power Exchange, a program to share community choice energy. I'm assuming folks on this webinar have at least a vague understanding of what community choice energy, also known as community choice aggregation, is. If not, please visit the Clean Power Exchange. There's a CCA 101 tab there that you can learn all about community choice. On that website, we have an interactive map of all of the community choice activity in the state of California in every city and county. There's e-news that our co-organizer here on the call today, on the webinar today, Ross Markey, is the one that sends that out. If you're not signed up for e-news, please do. I'm sure a lot of you heard about this webinar through the e-news. It also has a page that talks about the relationship between community choice and solar. So we also had a lot of activity last year, worked in coalition with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition and had some correspondence there, continuing work this year. And so for the sake of time, since we lost a little bit of time there, I want to get on with Ben's presentation. This year we held a symposium in Long Beach all about community choice and had about 400 folks there. We're going to be doing another one next year, so check in for that, stay tuned for that. The Central Valley case study that we are talking about today, and we have produced 4 other papers that we invite you to check out. Those will be posted on, or are posted on, Center for Climate Protection and Clean Power Exchange websites in the reports section. Let's see. So our next webinar is going to be on Thursday, August 3rd, 11 to noon. And this one is going to focus on one of those recent white papers that looks at the projected growth of community choice in the state and the relationship of that growth to the procurement that's occurred historically and currently for electricity customers. And so that's going to be on August 3rd. Mark your calendar. We should have the registration page open next week. So without any further ado, I do want to hand it off to Ben Foster so that he can pick it up from here. And Ben, I am going to attempt to give you the keyboard and mouse, and I'm clicking your name, so you should all of a sudden be able to control the horizontal and the vertical. So let me know if, yeah, I see your cursor moving there, so go to full screen, and I guess you can also, it puts it all the way back to the beginning, so it looks like you'll, oh no, there it is. Okay, take it away, Ben.
Great, thank you so much, Woody. I appreciate the opportunity to share some highlights from the recent report that we put out. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
I can hear you fine.
Great, so we'll go through this fairly quickly. Of course, the full study itself is available on the Clean Power Exchange website, and so you're welcome to read through that, and some of you may have already seen some of the highlights from there to date. So the first thing that I wanted to cover is, why is this topic, why did we do the study for San Joaquin Valley? Like, why specifically did we do that? And here we go. And so we looked across California, which is clearly a mover, a quick mover on community choice energy programs. Many jurisdictions are looking at community choice implementation or planning, and of course in San Joaquin Valley specifically, there are a number of jurisdictions where this is coming up as a hot topic and with huge potential for them to achieve clean energy goals and local economic goals. So we wanted to dive in specifically to their unique situations and needs and opportunities in the San Joaquin Valley. Clearly, the Valley has opportunity to drive more local renewables and has been primarily a net exporter of solar power at the utility scale statewide. So are there opportunities to do smaller scale deployment, but at a larger pace or a faster pace? We looked at a number of other studies, and the detailed analysis that was performed for the potential for local purchasing hasn't been done before, other than our earlier effort last year for the city of San Jose, which yielded an increased focus within their planning that was recently approved to set up and establish a CCE for the city itself. It actually increased their focus on local solar deployment as part of their planning exercise. So we did see a positive outcome, at least in the initial planning phases, based on the report. So that we wanted to expand that effort and impact potentially as well across the state and specifically in the San Joaquin Valley. We know that local control of energy purchasing decisions, when it's exerted in a focused way within a community choice program, can drive significant economic growth. So providing more information and concrete analysis and independent assessment of what those opportunities could look like and what the volume is that could be directed towards local investment would provide decision makers with the information that they need to set their goals confidently moving forward. So these are the main reasons why we did this study and are pleased to have the results available to you. Trying to advance the slide and I can't do that directly. There we go. So what's our approach? At a high level, what we're doing with this study wasn't to exhaustively look at the technical potential at every conceivable location across the valley. Instead, we're looking to determine the scale of opportunity in terms of economic impact, in terms of total scale of renewable deployment for a potential CCE in the Central Valley to increase local economic activity, specifically through new renewable energy. And so we did that by calculating the economic impact from local energy sources, meaning specifically looking at renewables. And because of the widespread deployment and all the tools and analysis that has been done on solar PV to date across the state and nationally, we wanted to focus on that particular technology. Now you'll hear a little bit later from Ismael more about some other renewable energy sources that could certainly fit in the analysis, but because of the tools that were available and the ease of deployment of solar PV, we focused on that technology within this study, but it could certainly be expanded to other types of renewable technology. We assumed the deployment itself of solar PV would avoid agriculturally productive or sensitive land. That's clearly something that we didn't want to assume that this would be large-scale utility projects, but more distributed generation type efforts at the small to medium to larger commercial scale project size. For local procurement, we looked at 3 different scenarios so that decision makers could evaluate across a scale what type of impact that may be beneficial for their communities and what level of purchasing may be something that would achieve their goals. So those scenarios specifically were 10%, 20%, and 33% of the total energy, electricity that a CCE could purchase would come from local renewable sources. So those are the 3 scenarios. And of course, one could interpolate or extrapolate from those 3 scenarios. We did include locally tailored assumptions, including energy use for each of the different counties that were included in the study, the different costs across the Central Valley as compared to other parts of the state or the country, labor and land cost and availability, system production characteristics in terms of solar project system characteristics, and other factors that were directly related to the Central Valley. We forecasted then from there the jobs and incremental economic activity starting in 2019 through 2024. And so a specific window looking forward. Now, again, this is all with the assumption that a CCE, community choice energy provider, would be put in place. There's not an active planning group yet for any particular community that we interacted with. This is prospectively looking at what could be done. We did look at other CCE studies, however, that had been performed across the state as other entities have been set up over the last 5 years or so. None of them had previously included really tailored geographically specific or locationally specific analyses. So we're excited that this study adds a new dimension and refines those previous estimates to make them more locally relevant. And then while there are grid benefits that have been identified from distributed generation, but have not really been quantified in a consistent way across the state, and also the investor-owned utility, their actions as it relates to CCE implementation, these are all things that are regulatorily determined at a state level or a PUC level. So we did not include those. We know there are impacts that are out there, but we did not want to include those in the analysis just because those would be out of the control of a CCE. Now let's turn to some more of the details here, specifically related to the analysis. We looked as a representation of the entire San Joaquin Valley at 3 specific counties. Now, we consulted with our partners, we consulted with Center for Climate Protection and others, and selected these 3 as representation, as a good cross-section of the different counties. So we did not include the full valley itself, which is important to note, but we did include these 3. So all the analysis that you'll see is focused on San Joaquin County, Fresno County, and Tulare County. Now, at a high level, just to give you a preview of the numbers that are included in the report, that between that 10% scenario, meaning 10% of the local electricity purchases would come from local renewable sources, up to 33% in just these, or across these 3 counties combined, that could create anywhere between 8,000 to 27,000 job years to support that level of activity and growth. In terms of economic impact, that could be anywhere between 800 million up to 2.7 billion in new economic activity over that horizon that we looked at from 2019 to 2024. And in fact, the total energy or electricity purchases that could fall under a CCE if it were to be established for in each of those 3 counties, so combined between those 3, is approximately 1.3 billion in annual electricity purchases that then would be shifted to local control to make those decisions about how much could come from local renewable sources versus non-local renewable sources. And we did a check to make sure that it was reasonable that this is possible to supply within these different scenarios enough solar power, for instance, and there are other options as well. This would increase the amount of distributed generation solar power by about 2 to 4 times. So certainly something that's reasonable within the valley at large. And so you'll see at the bottom some highlights in terms of the different characteristics of each of those counties on land area and population and potential for CCE activity. And we'll dive into each one of these 3 in some detail in the next 3 pages. But what's important here, just a quick note, is the CCE volume that we estimated is based on only direct investor-owned utility volume and does not include irrigation districts that serve some of these territories or direct access customers or others. So this is just the directly addressable electricity consumption in each of the counties. Next slide. Let's dive into the findings for San Joaquin County. So each of these, I'll walk through a little bit more detail on the first one, and then you'll see it's the same setup for Fresno County and Tulare County. But in the report, there are many more charts and graphs and details behind each of these, so I encourage you to read through that. Starting from the top on the left, we looked at the electricity consumption, and again, this is just the addressable electricity consumption in San Joaquin County for residential and non-residential. And then we're estimating what the CCE sales or what the CCE volume would be for the county at large, using an 85% retention rate, meaning 85% of those customers elect to stay with a new CCE if it were to be created. And so that is a conservative estimate because the average current retention rates within the CCEs that have been established is over 90%. So we took a conservative estimate on what the addressable volume would be. And then I'll focus on scenario 2, although you can certainly look through scenario 1 and 3 and do interpolations on the numbers in between. But what that would mean then, if 20% of that electricity consumption that falls under a CCE were to be purchased from local clean power sources, meaning that the choice for that CCE would be to purchase 20% of that volume from whether it's solar or wind or biomass or other sources from locally generated production, meaning this is an increase in activity in the county. That would be a shift of the total energy purchases to the local economy of approximately $74 million per year. Now, if it were all coming from solar power, and again, we modeled that because some of the tools and analysis are readily available to do those calculations, that would mean we would need about 466 megawatts of new solar PV capacity in San Joaquin County or in the surrounding area that we considered local to serve that particular need. So that's certainly something that falls in the realm of possibility from a distributed generation perspective. And what that would mean in terms of economic activity and jobs, you'll see a breakdown on an annual basis over that window that we looked at from 2019 to 2024, and you see on the chart on the top right. But by 2024, in total, the economic impact would be approximately $760 million of new economic activity, and that's through the design, construction, financing, and operations of the solar power that could be that would be needed to be procured if the CCE purchased 20% locally, and create over 7,500 job years during that period of time. Now, if we jump to Fresno County next, so we get to that one, you'll see the numbers. Because Fresno County has a much larger population and total energy consumption, that it's the numbers in total are higher, but you'll see it flows through the same way, where the 85% retention. We've got in terms of gigawatt hours, 6.2 or 6,200 gigawatt hours a year potentially that would fall under a CCE. And in terms of solar equivalent capacity, to serve 20% of that would be about 760 megawatts would need to be installed over a period of time. And so the totals by 2024 for Fresno County would be as you can see on an annual basis, over that period of time, could be about 1,255 per year over that 6-year planning horizon that we have. And then finally, for Tulare County, jump to the next one. So here, what's interesting is while Tulare County, the demographics are a bit different in terms of the population. I think we went one too far, so I can go back one. There we go. Well, the demographics are a bit different in terms of different land area and different population. The total electricity consumption is actually fairly similar in Tulare County to San Joaquin County. So the numbers that you'll see here in scenario 2 are very similar. Then that's just because the total electricity consumption that's addressable is a similar number. So going through the 20% then, meaning that it would need to be about 463 megawatts of solar capacity to address 20% of the total electricity consumption through clean power, renewable power sources locally. And by 2024, that would yield over 460 million in new economic activity and about 4,500 or 4,600 job years in total over that period of time. So what we see is very significant impact in each one of the counties. And if we look at it regionally, now rolling it up, again, we rolled it up just to see what these three combined would look like. It doesn't mean that there's one CCE necessarily that would be put in place for all of the counties together, but we wanted to combine it and say, well, you know, what if just three of the counties out of the broader San Joaquin Valley wanted to move forward? What would that look like in total economic impact? And so when we do that, and I'll just highlight again the scenario 2 in the center, that and the totals in terms of total jobs and total economic output, what you'll see here is that this is a very significant impact to the local economy in terms of jobs created in the clean energy sector and total economic impact of almost $1.7 billion. And this is just by shifting purchasing decisions. So that's an important factor here, is that a CCE has the ability to choose where it's going to buy the power from. Today, as a consumer of electricity from your investor-owned utility, you do not have that choice. You can't indicate to PG&E or SCE or others where they're going to purchase their energy from for you. But a CCE can make that choice, and can make that choice to create local benefits or not. That's within its control, within its mission. But what's interesting here and why we wanted to provide this is to demonstrate concretely what those benefits could be, so that a CCE can set their procurement targets based on cost ceiling in terms of
there may be an incremental cost.
Yep. Hey, Woody, can you hear me now? Woody, are we still there? and local economic impact goals. So we provide this range of scenarios from scenario 1 to scenario 3, so that policymakers or managers or leaders of a CCE can decide how much of this economic benefit they may want to be able to capture for their community. And so the study benefits, the last slide we have here for with the highlights. This one. The study benefits that we intended to provide here to readers was, one is that essentially this helps to establish one of the primary goals for CCEs and set a baseline for how to create local benefits through a purchasing strategy. We also hope that I can't see that slide right now. Woody, can you advance us to the slide 15? It also helps to, while that's coming up, I'll just go through those points. It also helps to assist in planning for energy procurement and programs that can be put in place. So if the goal would be 10% from local renewables or 30% from local renewables, that sets a number of things in motion about what sort of energy procurement process you may need to go through to identify local sources, and also what kinds of programs can be put in place to support them. On a statewide basis, now there's a 50% renewable energy goal, and that could potentially go up to 100%. So this sort of planning strategy on a local basis means that you can support that effort and help to direct those statewide goals towards your own community benefit. And then finally, what we see through this is the opportunity to...
Ben, have you advanced to the last slide?
We're there now.
Okay, somehow it came back to my screen. Anyway, we're on the last slide, so go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Woody. Appreciate that. And so I've run through the most of the points here, but the last one is that the other thing is what we've seen consistently across the state is that increased volume of clean energy deployment can reduce the costs, average costs for both residential consumers, commercial consumers, and large-scale consumers of clean energy. So one of the benefits of an integrated and well-thought-out strategy on the part of the CCE to procure more local energy that helps drive down costs for everyone, whether the CCE is doing the purchasing itself or other consumers that want to piggyback onto that activity. So we definitely see the opportunity to have community-wide benefits through increased clean energy activity. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Ismael to talk through their approach to this and the way that they consider renewable energy options for the Central Valley, and would be happy to answer questions at the end.
Great, thanks so much, Ben. Folks, this is Woody, and Ben, can you let me know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, okay, I'm assuming that everybody else can too. Thanks so much. I also just want to let folks know, I did not mention it at the introduction, that I did include the report itself as a handout on your control panel. It should be somewhere there. I'm not sure how your control attendees' control panels look, but there should be a handout tab, and the actual report is there. It's also in the resources section of cleanpowerexchange.org and on the Center for Climate Protection's website. So somehow the screen control got back to me without me doing anything. So I will now attempt to hand it off to Ismael. I've got your opening screen on there, Ismael, and I will let's try to hand it off here. Okay, there it is. So Ismael, you should now have control. And if you click full screen, go ahead and click this. Yeah, there you go. All right.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Woody, and Ben, thank you for turning over the mic here, and thank you for your thoughtful comments. As Woody mentioned, my name is Ismael Herrera. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Community and Economic Development here at Fresno State. We also operate the region's San Joaquin Valley Rural Development Center. And my comments are going to be based on some observations that we've made based on work we've done in the region, and they're going to be a little higher level than the nuts and bolts that you got from Ben. It's going to complement some of the findings that Ben made, and it's really going to be focused more on things to keep in mind as stakeholders in the San Joaquin Valley are considering community choice as an option for their community. Just the idea of choice and the idea of local procurement in some ways to accomplish that. So with that, I just want to give folks an introduction to the region. If you're not familiar with it, just the snapshot of where we're located and who we are. That is a satellite or a satellite view of the San Joaquin Valley, and some basic social demographic information that I thought I'd offer just to set a little bit of context for why these type of initiatives like community choice can be beneficial to a region that, although very, filled with a lot of challenges, a lot of socioeconomic challenges. There is a lot of wealth in the region, so it's an irony that we struggle with here in the San Joaquin Valley. You can see what the demographics indicate there. Try to advance it here. One of the things I wanted to talk about moving forward was and leveraging the discussion that Ben just walked us through was the focus on solar and how that should be considered as one of the procurement options, one of the options for the diverse portfolio of renewables that someone would consider when they're establishing a CCE. But one thing I did want to bring to folks' attention, if you're not familiar with already, is there's already been an effort that's taken place here in the San Joaquin Valley to narrow the scope of where potential future solar development could take place. And that's an effort that took place over the last year and a half by several stakeholders, and essentially identified about 470,000 acres of land in the 8-county region of the San Joaquin Valley that has already been vetted with the diverse set of stakeholders, everybody from the solar industry to agricultural interests, environmental interests, tribal considerations have been considered, even Department of Defense considerations have been considered, and it essentially identified this region in green here in western Fresno County and parts of Kings County as the prime hotbed for future solar development in the San Joaquin Valley. And this is, for the most part, fallowed, privately owned agricultural land that is no longer in production, and it's mostly located within the Westlands Water District in this part of the region. And this is where efforts are being made by folks at the county level in Fresno and in Kings County to some extent to try to encourage people to consider development of future solar in this area where there's not going to be too much disagreement about implementing projects like that. In fact, we had a recent discussion. There's been a lot of attention being given to this matter by the Local Government Commission and the Governor's Office for Planning and Research. They've been holding stakeholder meetings throughout the state. They had a recent one here in Fresno a few weeks ago, and trying to identify what the land use challenges are in the San Joaquin Valley and what some possible solutions could be for establishing renewable energy projects. And this was also, this same study was identified as a resource to that group as well. And so it's definitely a document, a study that we want to leverage when considering community choice, and it's the document we want to make available to communities in the region to take a look at and reference as they're considering community choice. Now, the study focuses on every single one of the 8 counties. This just happens to be the region that is identified as the least conflict, meaning that the various stakeholder interests have all agreed that this is where primary focus should be given. And Fresno County has even went as far as stating that their planning and permitting process would be expedited to developers who would consider their projects in this, at least in the green area within its boundaries. Some of the initial feedback we've gotten from developers is that why we haven't seen an outpouring of development. Now, there are a lot of projects in this part of the county already, but some developers have reported that the costs for running the electricity to some of the existing transmission lines are a little bit higher than they would like to see because of the location of the screen area. It's not in proximity to where that existing infrastructure is, and so that has been a barrier or a challenge that some developers have identified as deciding not to develop projects in this region. So that should be noted. There is a lot of interest in the region for renewable sources, for specifically solar PV, and I think it's definitely one of the renewable sources that should be considered when a community is considering community choice for themselves. Here are some examples of it throughout the San Joaquin Valley where there have been projects done at the residential, at the commercial, industrial, and then at the public level as well. Just to point out a couple, here's a facility in downtown Fresno that's owned by the county. It's the Fresno County First 5 facility. You can see it's got a significant amount of solar on its location there. This is a school district in western Fresno County that's not only done the solar parking lot, but they've also added solar installation to some of their classroom space. And the public schools have really ramped up their involvement in this realm. We see a lot of carports in rural school districts that have taken advantage of this technology and are using it also for their career technical education curriculum. So it's serving a dual purpose. You see Visalia Unified in Tulare County, they have an example as well. And then here's an example of industry stepping up and doing something that's proactive in regards to their bottom line and the environment. This is an example, and also in downtown Fresno. This is OK Produce. This is a 231 kilowatt system on top of their roof where they're warehousing and cold storage units. At the time of its installation, it was the largest privately owned solar system in the central San Joaquin Valley. So you'll see that there's both public and private sector examples. And then this last example here is an example of the growing interest for not only solar, but the use of electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. This is a pilot program that was deployed in Fresno County earlier this year, first of its kind in the nation, where it's a solar mobile electric vehicle charging station that is located in all 13 of Fresno County's incorporated cities. They're all, for the most part, disadvantaged communities, and it's being used by both the city, school district fleets, but it's also available to local residents to take advantage of as well. One of the attractive features of community choice is the local control that Ben talked about earlier, and the ability to determine for oneself as a community what the mix of renewables can be and what it should be, and in doing so, there's the ability to really have a profound economic impact on local communities, on the local economy. And Ben talked about the idea of local procurement and identifying sources for one's community choice initiative. And I think there's aside from solar, there's I think a growing need, and there's an opportunity definitely for other sources of renewables such as biomass. And biomass can come in two ways here in the San Joaquin Valley. This is a map here to the right of the biomass facilities that are located in the San Joaquin Valley in the 8-county region. The green dots here indicate the facilities that are still in operation, are being utilized. You'll see that there are 5 of those within the San Joaquin Valley, one in Stockton, one outside of Merced and El Nido, one out in Chowchilla, Fresno, and then one over north of Bakersfield. And the white ones represent the facilities that have closed over the last 5 years: Tracy, Mendota, my hometown of Mendota, one outside of Madera, Dinuba, Porterville, Delano, biomass facilities that have closed, and that with the closure has also also took with it a significant amount of jobs that are full-time, year-round jobs in those local communities. And so I think that the community choice effort provides an opportunity for communities to reconsider some of these idle facilities as a way to do some local procurement and make some positive impacts in their community with job creation, economic activity. In the case of these facilities, the primary feedstocks, they serve a dual purpose, because they're not only supporting job creation and energy, producing energy, but they also help with the waste that is coming out of the agricultural industry in the region, some of the municipal green waste, and the byproducts from wood manufacturing operations that may exist in the region as well. So they're also helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions, because instead of the open pit fires out in the middle of these rural fields, those wood agricultural waste byproducts could be taken to some of these facilities. They are being that is being done to some extent, but you'll see that with the closure of these 6 other facilities, there's opportunity to do more of that. And so when considering community choice and local procurement, I think that these biomass facilities definitely have a role to play. The other type of biomass facility that we see there being a need for, and there's definitely opportunity for communities to consider, especially those communities along the Sierra Nevada and in the foothills, are facilities that are located within those foothill communities. Places like North Fork, who were once thriving lumber mill communities and who have since declined in their economic activity. This provides an opportunity for them to generate some of that those jobs that were once there through that other industry, and be able to replicate what's been done in places like Ione, California, up in Amador County, where in this case a biomass 18 megawatt facility is in operation and is helping clean up the forest debris that is located there in the Sierra Nevada, and it's being turned into to renewable energy and providing sources of energy to local homes and industries. So aside from providing jobs and helping clean up the debris in the forest, that will help prevent some of the forest fires and the millions of dollars that go into fighting forest fires every year, it also helps make the watersheds up in the Sierra Nevada more efficient by removing the debris and allowing those creeks, those streams, those rivers to deliver in a more efficient manner the water that's needed on the valley floor for the use in industry in our municipalities and for production of hydroelectric power as well. So there's added benefits to considering these type of biomass facilities in places like the foothill communities of the Sierra Nevada. And so with that, I just thought I'd offer those brief comments for those folks who may be contemplating community choice. While solar is definitely a lucrative and viable option, I think that other sources such as biomass should be considered as well. When implementing the community choice project, I think there should be a consideration given to a diverse source of renewable sources, and the local procurement element of this is definitely involved when considering facilities like biomass. And so with that, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to my brief comments. And with that, Woody, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Ismael. Very, very good, interesting presentation. And I will make an attempt here to switch it back to me. Oops, what's going on there? So maybe it is back to me. Let's see. All right. You should be seeing a your questions, please screen. Is that what folks see?
That's correct.
Hello?
Yes.
You guys see that? Good. Okay, so everyone, attendees, that concludes the formal presentation. So at this point, we do welcome your questions. I want to let you all know that, you know, if we don't get to all of the questions today, we will have them all recorded as you've typed them in. I mentioned earlier, you should have a control panel that has a little question tab where you can type in your questions. If we don't get to all of them today, we will provide them to Ben and Ismael, and they can follow up with you to round out those answers. But Ross, Ross, assuming you're still there, someone
Still here.
in Oregon, actually, perhaps you've got some questions lined up. I hope.
Yes.
If not, hopefully some will be coming in. But Ross, what do we have so far?
Yes, we do have a few questions and clarification on one on our first question from Kyler Crocker. He asks, how many acres would be needed for the solar PV? This question came up during Ben's segment and clarified, so it's prime acreage, not just the land area from the report.
Right. Yeah.
And
so yeah, this is Ben. I'm happy to provide some guidance on that. Depending on the type of efficiency or the level of efficiency of the different panels and design, and whether they're this is for solar PV or if they are tracking or not, can influence the amount of space that's directly required for a solar array of a given size. So if it were to be open land, for instance, in that green zone that Ismael shared, you might consider somewhere between 3 to 5 acres per megawatt as a range. Again, depending on whether it's, you know, if it's a tracking system with high efficiency, it's going to be less. If it's not tracking with lower efficiency, it'll be more, like on the higher end of that range. There's, you know, typically some additional space that's required for a buffer zone around it or access to and from. However, the point I'd like to make on that is that while that would be for, I'll call it open area development, there's still tons of untapped opportunity on already developed space. That's parking lots, covered parking lots, that's industrial facilities, the brownfield sites, that, again, those ratios would still roughly hold, but it wouldn't be, you would consider that to be already space that's been developed in some way. And Ismael showed a bunch of examples where that's already the case, whether it's on a warehouse facility or a municipal facility or a parking lot area. So generally you can think about it that way, but it's important I want to make the point that we see lots of opportunity, not in the larger scale development alone, but really in the distributed generation, smaller scale development.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And I'm tracking your responses too, so we'll be able to share these out. So the next question comes from Lee Feliciano. And Lee asks, what are the assumptions regarding procurement cost of local power versus RE from larger outside projects? So,
yeah,
RE,
great.
RE would be renewable energy.
Yep, I think that's important to note for folks who may not pick that up immediately. So, so to paraphrase that, or to rephrase it perhaps, is what sort of cost assumptions would we make or have we made relative to local smaller scale development versus larger scale utility development? I'll make a couple of points on that I think are relevant. One is in the San Joaquin Valley, many of those costs are a little bit lower than they would be in other markets. So, for instance, where you see the CCEs up in Marin and Sonoma County, where land values are higher, labor costs are higher, some of the infrastructure costs could be higher. Same with Silicon Valley in terms of San Jose and Peninsula Clean Energy. Certainly, you know, the peninsula has the highest land cost and average home price in the in the state certainly, and close to the highest in the entire country. And so when we look at the Central Valley, there's definitely, the cost to install is lower on average, which is why you see some of the larger, part of the reason why you see some of the larger utility scale projects going in there rather than other areas. So we did model it with a lower average cost to procure, and looking forward, we continue to see costs go down over time as they have. So we see the economics all moving in a favorable direction. We did not, within this, try to quantify exactly what the differences would be or the impact would be on a CCE's overall cost model, because where the other sources, let's take scenario 2 where 20% comes from local renewables, where does the remaining 80% come from, and what contracts are they likely to sign? And typically CCEs right now have a starting point of 50% renewable in total. They can come from a number of different sources. So we would anticipate smaller scale local deployment to be more expensive to a certain extent than the larger scale remote projects. But we didn't attempt to quantify that specifically in terms of what implication might have for a CCE's cost overall. What we did instead was be able to, we compared or we're providing the analysis on what the economic impact is in real dollars and jobs, so that local stakeholders could consider whether that economic impact is essentially worth the investment to a CCE. And what we saw with it, not our study, but analyzing the study that had been done for the city of San Jose, is that there's a very marginal increase in total CCE costs overall at the scenario 1 level, which is what they looked at 10%. And yet all those economic benefits convey to the local community. So there's a 10x or more multiplier benefits to the local community relative to the increase in cost.
Great, thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So our next question comes from Paul Berry, and he says, it looks like your average project is 6 megawatts, which is larger, or a rather larger array. Why is that the average project? And this to me appears high, meaning many smaller arrays are probably the final reality on the ground, which means you are conservative. And he says that's good, but he asks that you please comment.
Sure, yeah, good questions. I'm not sure where that calculation comes from per se. I will, in terms of the 6 megawatt size, what we've done instead that is we've allocated out a certain percentage in the analysis that would come from larger scale projects, medium commercial scale, and small utility scale. So there's a weighted average that we performed that assumes a much smaller average size. So we're looking at the deployment primarily coming from medium scale commercial, which is about 250 kilowatts, up to small utility scale of 5 megawatts, although we haven't put a huge number in there. So our average size is actually much smaller than that, than a 6 megawatt. So I'd be happy to follow up on the assumptions and how those numbers came in, and take any input as well. So I'm not sure I can answer that directly, but I'll just say we did have a range of system sizes, and on average, they're in the range of 250 kilowatt up to 5 megawatts.
Okay, great. And now, actually, we've had a couple of questions for Ismael come in. And the first question is, I want to ask Ismael if he is aware the biomass facilities are one of the most important sources of PM 2.5, so particulate matter 2.5 in the valley floor, and most of these facilities are polluting disadvantaged communities such as Delano, Malaga. While biomass facilities in the foothills may be okay to handle dead trees, is there any comment that you have there?
Yeah, I think I'm aware of that they're not the squeakiest of cleanest sources of energy, but they do provide a triple bottom line in many ways, alternative to some of the existing practices for getting rid of ag waste that exists in this region. So as I mentioned, as opposed to open pit fires during cloudy days, overcast days, this provides an opportunity for at least reducing some of those emissions while also providing local employment opportunities in places like the disadvantaged communities I mentioned. I do have the firsthand knowledge of seeing these facilities in operation, given that one of them was located or was active in my hometown, and it's also in proximity to a vast amount of agricultural activity, and I do see a lot of that waste that would have been diverted to that biomass go up in flames as I'm commuting to my work here at the university on those cloudy days. So yeah, I'm aware that like I said, there is contamination associated with it. It's not as clean as solar, but in places like North Fork up in the foothills of Madera County, it would make a huge economic impact for a town that was relying on its lumber industry, and it's since disappeared as of early 1990s, and this provides it an economic engine that it sorely needs. And so it's just a thing to it's one option to consider. I don't think it's the only option out there, but I think it should be reflected in the portfolio when a community is deciding its community choice project.
So out of respect for, this is Woody here, out of respect for everyone's time, unfortunately we are going to have that that be the final question. Thanks, Ross, for fielding those, and thank you everyone for your questions. Again, the questions that did not get a chance to get aired here, we will make sure that Ben and Ismael have those questions, and hopefully we can get those answers to you. I think we should also mention that we are still open, for issues or points that come up that are significant. We are still open to revising the study that is available, limit to a limited degree, just really significant things that are need. So just a few final thoughts I just want to sort of touch on before we close out. Which is that, I think what we saw early on in Ben's presentation, obviously a high degree of potential for economic benefit, as we also saw in the similar case study we did for San Jose. The more local renewables you build, the bigger economic benefit you get. I think Ismael, sort of pointed out that a lot is already happening, and I think the key takeaway is that community choice energy with that local decision-making power can accelerate the degree to which solar and other renewables are being deployed. I do want to say that we also see that stakeholder engagement very important. As Ismael pointed out, a lot of players, a lot of more folks potential to benefit and to participate in the decision making and the deployment. Appropriate deployment and taking into account equity, as the questioner mentioned, that we have a diversity of energy sources and emerging opportunities for integration with electric vehicles and storage and fuel switched heating and air space heating and cooling systems and other technologies. Final thought is that just if you do live or work in the Central Valley and you want to see community choice energy in your community, we urge you to urge your elected leaders to pursue an evaluation of community choice. And if you are an elected leader or staff of one of the cities or counties in the San Joaquin Valley, we encourage you to evaluate community choice. Again, I want to thank everyone for participating today. We are at time. Just one more reminder that our next webinar is Thursday, August 3rd, and we will be providing an overview of another report that looks at community choice growth and the relationship to investor-owned utility procurement. And lastly, my contact information, for any questions, comments, concerns relating to the webinar, you want further follow-up, please feel free to contact me. And we very much appreciate everybody for joining us today. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you, Ben, Ismael, and Ross.
Thank you, Woody.
All right. Bye-bye.